All right, let's get right into it. You've probably heard the term thrown around, whispered in political circles, maybe seen it in headlines, the deep state. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and really try to understand what people mean when they say that. We're exploring this really controversial idea of powerful, hidden networks that might be operating just out of sight.
I mean, it's the biggest question there is when it comes to power, right? When you see a major decision being made, who is actually pulling the levers? Is it the leaders we vote for? Or are there other forces, unseen forces, that are really calling the shots? That's the mystery we're unpacking today.
So this whole deep state idea, it really boils down to this concept of a state within a state. The core belief is that there's this hidden network of really powerful elites, and they're operating behind the scenes, maybe even undermining democracy and going against the will of the very people they're supposed to serve.
So, who are we talking about here? Well, the theory suggests it's not just one single group. It's more like a mix, a hybrid network of powerful people from inside the government, from massive corporations, and even from non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. And the big accusation is that this network secretly controls how policy is made, sometimes using really noble-sounding causes, like promoting democracy or human rights, as a kind of cover for their own interests. Okay, but where did this term deep state even come from? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a political thriller, but it's not a new invention. It actually has some very specific historical roots.
It turns out the term actually comes from Turkey, from the phrase derin devlet, which literally translates to deep state. And here's the most important part of that definition. It's a network of non-elected people, individuals who secretly influence or maybe even control government policy, all from the shadows.
And what's fascinating here is that this idea of a deep state isn't some one-size-fits-all concept. It really changes depending on where you are. So in Turkey, it usually means insiders within the government itself. But if you go to Pakistan, the term is often used to talk about a government that's heavily influenced or even controlled by its powerful military leaders. So context is everything.
Okay, so if these shadow networks are real, how do they actually, do anything? What are their methods? Let's take a look at the alleged toolkit they might use to get what they want.
Let's imagine for a second that there's a playbook for this kind of thing. What would be in it? We're going to walk through the alleged tactics, from the really obvious political moves like regime change to the much more subtle economic and social pressures.
All right, let's start with the political tools. The source material talks about a long history of alleged missions to change regimes. Then you've got something called color revolutions. These are basically unarmed public uprisings, often using a specific color or a flower as their symbol, and they're designed to totally discredit and replace a government. And this isn't just theory, by the way. You have leaders, like the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, who have openly said that foreign powers were behind their removal from office.
And just to give you some real-world examples of what that looks like, here are three really famous ones from the early 2000s. You had the Rose Revolution in Georgia, the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, and the Tulip Revolution in Kyrgyzstan. These events are often brought up as classic examples of how popular movements, sometimes with alleged outside help, can lead to a complete overhaul of a government. But it's not just about politics, right? There's also the incredible power of money and military hardware. The source points out that defense companies can make a lot of money from conflicts by selling more weapons. And on the economic side, you have tactics like shock therapy. That's where a country's economy is forced into these sudden, often really painful free market changes, like getting rid of price controls and subsidies all at once. And then there are even more direct financial attacks, from shaking up an entire economy to zeroing in on specific companies.
Okay, that last point on short selling is kind of complex, so let's walk through it. The source brings up Hindenburg research as an example of this supposed four-step method. Step 1, you pick a target company. Step 2, you publish a big report accusing them of all sorts of bad stuff. Step 3, before you publish, you short their stock, which is basically a bet that the price is about to tank. And finally, Step 4, if the report spooks investors and the stock does fall, you make a profit. It's a very high-stakes game.
Power isn't always about brute force. It's also about who controls the story. This is what people call soft power. The sources we looked at allege that media stories can be shaped to put pressure on governments, that tech giants can sway regulations, and that even civil society movements with good intentions can be funded or used by outside groups to interfere with a country's internal projects.
And look, this isn't just a vague feeling. There are attempts to actually put a number on this.
An Intelligence Bureau report in India, which was cited in the source material, claimed that foreign-funded NGOs have had a negative impact on the country's GDP growth to the tune of 2 to 3%. That is a huge number. It suggests these activities can have very, very real economic consequences.
Okay, so we've talked about the theory. Now let's ground this in a real-world case study. Let's look at the debate happening right now in India over whether a deep state exists there, and check out the different arguments.
So in India, this is a really complicated debate with two very different sides. On one side, you have journalists like Steve Cole and Josie Joseph who argue that, yes, India absolutely has its own kind of deep state. Cole points a finger at the influence of the Indian Foreign Service, while Joseph talks about a broader state within a state that he says is biased against the powerless. But then on the other side, the government flatly denies these claims, saying its policies are guided by principles of non-interference and a philosophy that the world is one family.
So if these are the alleged threats, what's the defense? What can be done to push back against them? Let's look at what the source material suggests as the way forward, basically a set of strategies to help a nation protect its sovereignty.
So the source material lays out this 5-step strategy, and it's designed as a direct response to the threats we've been talking about. First, to handle the influence of certain NGOs, it calls for much tighter rules on foreign funding. Second, to fight back against narrative attacks, it says you need to build a powerful counter-narrative of your own. Third, you've got to support your own homegrown think tanks and media. Fourth, build strong alliances with other countries that see things the same way. And finally, and this is so crucial in our digital age, you have to protect your data sovereignty with top-notch cybersecurity.
And that point about controlling the narrative, it's considered so important that you have people like India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval talking about it. He's saying that a strong counter-narrative isn't just about PR, it's a matter of national security, something that's totally essential for protecting the country's integrity.
So after all of this, we're left with a really big and, honestly, a really tough question. In a world that is so deeply interconnected, where influence can just zap across borders through money, media, and technology, what does it actually mean for a country to be truly sovereign anymore? There are no easy answers here, but it's something we all need to be thinking about. It's a lot to chew on.